Welcome to another Indivisible Eugene podcast. I'm your host, Kate Baker. Today, we are talking about the Women's March that happened today in Eugene, Oregon. And here to discuss that with us is Abby Gershonzen. And Abby is from the Refugee Resettlement Community of Lane County. She's been on their steering committee and also the External Communication and Languages Resources teams. Welcome, Abby.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let me ask just before we start talking about the march, what exactly is the Refugee Resettlement Committee of Lane County?
And first of all, with apologies, and I know it's a long name, but it's actually Refugee Resettlement Coalition of Lane County, and that little piece is important simply because we really are a coalition. We kind of just came together as a bunch of volunteers who had a similar goal, and we're sort of from all stripes across the Eugene-Springfield area, and we are an all-volunteer organization. We started in the spring of 2016 with this goal in common to bring refugees into Lane County and support all aspects of their resettlement. So we formed a partnership with Catholic Community Services. As you probably know, they do other things in the community as well. And Catholic Community Services are the organization that signed the official contract, the Memorandum of Understanding with the, it's actually the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. That's one of 9 volunteer agencies that brings refugees into the country working with the State Department. So the State Department vets, accepts the refugees. They then distribute them to these 9 volunteer agencies, and we signed a contract. We work with the largest of those. And that is how we started getting refugees and resettling them in the U.S. So our organization we work in tandem, is a good way of saying, with Catholic Community Services. The Refugee Resettlement Coalition of Lane County, what we do is we've got all the trained volunteers, and we support every aspect of the resettlement. We provide interpreters, advocates to navigate the system, support with registering. Refugees are required to register for a lot of things, including ID cards, the military if they're of age, schools, English classes, there's employment. We also provide physical and mental health professionals. We furnish housing, although we don't pay rent, and generally welcoming these people into our country, and we support them as they're transitioning from a completely different culture in most cases, completely different language. We're also trying to help them as they go through the trauma of either war, losing loved ones, having suffered long-term persecution, and we operate completely with using consensus and for our decision-making at our meetings. And we do work completely in tandem with the Catholic Community Services, who have, as I mentioned, they have the contract with the volunteer agency through the State Department. They've got a social worker who kind of oversees our advocacy operations, and they've got the nonprofit status. So
I see. Wow, that is very, I'm sorry?
I said it's been a marriage and a successful one.
Wow, that is a very comprehensive program. Well, I guess my next question would be, just briefly, why would you say the coalition decided to march today? Would you say they were marching for something or marching against something?
Thank you. That's a really good question. So I could put it either way, but I'd like to say we were marching for the continued acceptance of the fact, as a fact, that not only are we a nation of refugees, but we must continue as a nation of refugees. We must continue to remain this, and here I'm going to wax a little cheesy, but this really brilliant and powerful country that we've been as a result of the fact that we accept people as refugees from all over the world. And I'd like to add just one little thing that I remember reading somewhere in this last year, that one interesting thing that you get when you get a refugee that you can't get from any other kind of citizen or resident is You get somebody who has the view of where they came from and what they've been through and the bad and the good there. And then they're coming into this whole new society. So they have this kind of vision from above, as it were, that is not shared by many, many people who were just born into a country and raised there. So we were overjoyed. We received our first 2 refugee families in the fall of 2016, and then the 45th president was elected, and since his inauguration, sadly, we haven't received a single refugee family. So if you look at the statistics nationwide, fiscal year 2017, which was the end of Obama's last year in office, it goes September 30th to September 30th, that fiscal year, the U.S. accepted 85,000 refugees. Then this last fiscal year, the very next fiscal year, 2018, the country so far has accepted 3,500 refugees, just a bit over. If we keep going at this pace for the rest of the year, we won't even get to half the 45,000 refugees. That's the new quota that Trump put into place. So even as what we're watching, and it's going on quietly, and this is part of why we marched to call attention to this, is that the larger refugee programs across the country are largely being dismantled, disbanded. They're in turmoil. We have this very well-oiled refugee resettlement system, and it's being decimated because between the back and forth, the confusion with the 3 travel bans instituted by the administration, and then the lack of funding, because funding comes with the refugees who come for the staff that takes care of them in these organizations. So we're currently witnessing this kind of whole-scale, very intentional shrinking of our refugee acceptance into this country. And so we're marching to let our elected representatives know loud and clear that we want to keep those gates open. We want to keep that torch burning, if you want to put it that way. And for me, that has a personal meaning because all 4 of my grandparents came here as immigrants. They came through Ellis Island, so they went right by that Statue of Liberty. And I know today that they would not have been allowed into this country. They would have perished where they were suffering persecution. They would have not survived, and therefore me, the second-generation American, would not be here. So it's just really clear to me. Yeah. It really just kills me on a daily basis. Sorry, am I interrupting there? To know that every day these bans get instituted, overturned, reinstated, the DACA Act is kicked down the road, that not only are people are dying in war zones, they're being sent back into war zones in Somalia, they're drowning at sea, desperately trying to get to safe places, they're in refugee camps starving, and in this country, people are being deported, raids are happening. So that is just something that we do not want to let that fade into the background. So we have very strong reasons for wanting to march and call attention to this.
Well, I see what you mean, that it's sort of both marching for and marching against, right? So now that you've done your marching, what do you think? Did you feel like the event was a success today's event?
So, yes, I would say the event was a wild success. I haven't seen the numbers, but I've lived in Eugene for 23 years, and it's the largest number of marchers I've ever seen for any kind of protest or rally in Eugene. And to me, what was especially salient, what was especially important, and it feels like that it felt like a march that was more about where we overlap, where we come together, what we share. I'm not trying not to use that buzzword intersectionality, but that we were not a balkanized group of these separate organizations. We're each trying to separately reverse climate change, support women's rights, Black Lives Matter, Latinx, LGBTQ+, healthcare for all rights, Daquistas. These are all crucial. The recent expelling of the Haitians and El Salvadorans who are accepted here, the hashtag #MeToo. We're not each there for our separate causes, and it felt like to me that I could have very proudly held pretty much any one of the signs I saw out there in the march today, and that I think maybe this is the sort of silver lining of this 45th presidency and administration, is that we've been kind of forced into sharing this larger vision and having this bigger picture. So we're much more today for me with seeing what we have in common and how we can come together to accomplish our goals. And if I have time, I would give you 2 examples of what the Refugee Resettlement Coalition of Lane County is doing sort of in changing under this new presidency. Is there time to mention that?
Well, we definitely have time for one. So sure, give us the best example.
Okay, so the best one is that what happens? We're not getting refugees. That's what we formed to do, right? They're not coming. Do we sit on our hands? Do we twiddle our thumbs? No, we decided that at this point we have formed a pilot project and we are supporting asylum seekers. So, okay, there's no refugees coming through. We have asylum seekers in our community, and we're doing exactly the same services and support that for the asylum seekers that we would have done that we have done in the past for the refugees. So official pipeline closes off with the State Department. Okay, we have a pilot project going on, and we recently started it. We're working with 5 families. We're supporting the asylum seekers through navigating the system, access to legal help, everything that we would have done for our previous refugees. And right now we've got families from Cameroon, from Yemen, from Guatemala. They're all documented, but the way the asylum seeker process is that they have to await a court hearing to see if they'll be granted asylum, but they're all documented. So this is, as I mentioned, the other thing is just more, we formed a team to educate and advocate community. So there's so many misunderstandings in our community about refugees and immigrants. So we've kind of turned, but none of us could stand just kind of watching the clock tick for 4 years. So I think that's it's a good thing. We're still active, and that leads, in fact, to the last question of was it something about the march? Has it changed anything?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Do you feel like this did anything, or was it just a nice outing and we all go home feeling warm and cozy and reinforced?
Oh, good question. So for I think for the coalition and for everybody who was out there, today in the march confirmed that we are still there. We are not sitting on our hands. We are not twiddling our thumbs. We are not going away. And in fact, we're working harder than ever, and we're finding new ways to still do the things that are important to us.
That is terrific, Abby. And tell me, if any listeners would like to have more information about the coalition, where can they go to get that? Do you have a website?
Yes, we have a website, RRCLC. That's rrclc.org. And we have a Facebook page. And we also have a newsletter that if you go to the website, you can click and become a recipient of our e-news, and that will kind of let you know what's going on. And again, because we're working together, we often post things in the community that, for example, there's a University of Oregon group called No Lost Generation, and they are working with refugees and trying to they've got a fundraiser coming up to raise money for, I think it's 5 scholarships for refugees to go to the U of O. So, again, this is just part of joining hands and working together.
Well, all right. Thank you so much for your time, Abby, and we really appreciate you talking to us today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for organizing this. I just want to say it was beautifully organized. It was wonderful to get to walk in the street, and I saw you all out there with your sashes and your vests, and thank you for making this possible.
Well, you're certainly welcome. And on that note, this has been another Indivisible Eugene podcast.